We've told you what happened in Wuhan, but there was another very important meeting that took place today, another historic meeting, and this was on the Korean peninsula in the demilitarized zone. That is where the president of South Korea, Moon Jae-in, held talks with the president of North Korea, the supreme leader as he calls himself, Kim Jong-un. It's the first time in 7 decades that the countries which have been loggerheads have come together. There was only an armistice in place since 1953 after the war, and today the two leaders have declared no more war in Korea. WION was there on the South Korean side of the demilitarized zone to bring you all the day's top developments.
Sharp at 9:30 Korean time, the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un reached the Peace House in Panmunjom village for his historic summit with South Korean President Moon Jae-in. Every act in this meeting was meticulously choreographed. The two leaders shook hands on the line dividing the two Koreas and exchanged pleasantries. As Kim Jong-un stepped over the line, called the 38th parallel, he became the first North Korean leader to set foot in South Korean soil. His wife, Ri Sol-ju, arrived separately. At the Peace House, reflecting the mood of the summit, Kim signed in the guest book with this message: "A new history begins now, the age of peace, at the starting point of history." The two Korean leaders also planted a pine tree from the year 1953, when the armistice ending the Korean War was signed. The two leaders threw soil sourced from north and south and watered the plant. In the defining image of the day, the two leaders walked over a blue-painted bridge in the demilitarized zone and, seated on a bench, had a one-on-one conversation, lasting almost 30 minutes. Later, addressing the media, Kim Jong-un made some general remarks, promising not to repeat past mistakes.
I have crossed such a borderline, and I come here.
북한남 언결의 소망과 기대를 무겁게 받아들이고 북남 인민들이 절실히 바라는 문제 해결을 위해 많은 의제들을 진지하게
We hope that the peninsula could hear more signs of peace, and on top of that, we're gonna take a lot of effective measures so that peace and prosperity will settle down here in the Korea Peninsula, and we will have a new chapter of development. From now on, the peninsula will not see war again. We will move towards the pathway of peace. In the past years, because of separation, our peninsula has undergone a lot of suffering, but we are convinced that we can move past such an obstacle. That's why we're standing here.
A joint Panmunjom declaration will now form the blueprint for peace talks between the two nations. It seeks to address several sticking points in the bilateral relations between the two Koreas. Complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. Trilateral meetings with the US and China to resolve conflicts. Disarmament by both nations in a phased manner. Strict adherence to the non-aggression agreement. More exchanges, visits, and cooperation at all levels. Denuclearization still remains the sticking point, although the Panmunjom Declaration speaks of phased disarmament and denuclearization. Kim Jong-un himself, during his media address, skirted the issue. Bureau Report, WION.
So what did the two bitter enemies, two leaders who were so far seen as bitter enemies of each other, achieve in today's talks? WION's Ramesh Ramachandran sums it up from Seoul.
He came, he saw, he concurred with Moon Jae-in that now there is no turning back and that it is in the interest of the two Koreas that they have permanent peace on the Korean peninsula. But the big takeaway from the third Inter-Korean summit, which concluded in Panmunjom village inside the demilitarized zone that separates North Korea from South Korea, is that Moon Jae-in told in his joint press statement along with Kim Jong-un that North Korea has agreed that complete denuclearization will be achieved and that it remains their common goal. Now, on balance, Kim Jong-un has shared a new facet of his personality, one that is more amenable to reason, more reasonable, more accommodating, and that this might work to his advantage going forward in changing the world's perception of him as a madman or unpredictable politician. On balance, the challenges going forward remain to resolve the other contentious issues of unification of inter-Korean relations. But Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un have declared in their joint press statements that they will maintain regular contacts going forward, and that Moon Jae-in will be traveling to Pyongyang later this year for a reciprocal visit to North Korea. Also, that they will stop all propaganda broadcasts that are beamed into their respective territories across the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, from the 1st of May, and that this will set the stage. This is a good omen, so to speak, for the much anticipated meeting between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. Remember, Donald Trump has always said that he wants North Korea to expressly commit itself to complete, verifiable and irreversible denuclearization, and that, to my mind, has been indicated in so many words in Moon Jae-in's joint press statement, but he said that complete denuclearization shall be their common objective. All in all, a fruitful, successful inter-Korean summit, one which bodes well for the two Koreas and their respective peoples. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran in Seoul for WION.
Today's landmark meeting between the leaders of North and South Korea saw mixed reactions. Some in South Korea said that this was not the best idea. Others said that this is the best course to strike peace. And these reactions were reflected internationally, in fact, as pictures and news flashes of the meeting beamed across screens and social media. These are the reactions we got.
As the North and South Korean leaders met in their first summit for the two Koreas in over a decade, some 300 South Korean protesters gathered near the inter-Korean border today. They do not like the North Korean regime. They do not trust the influence the North could have on the South.
I came here because I was upset and annoyed at the inter-Korean summit. The Republic of South Korea is collapsing. It's becoming communist. We're gathered here to say we're against the South and North Korean summit.
But another 100 or so people were also there to demonstrate their support for the historic meet.
I suddenly burst into tears when the North Korean leader crossed into the south, met President Moon Jae-in and crossed the military demarcation line. I don't know why exactly I was crying, but I was touched because of that moment.
South Korean politicians who've been actively trying to bridge North-South relations for decades have high hopes for what these talks will result in.
This summit of the heads of state is meaningful to steer the North-South relations back on the right track. Over the past 25 years, we can say that the Korean peninsula has failed to get out of the shadow cast by the Cold War due to the existence of the nuclear crisis. So I think this summit is a decisive opportunity for the two Koreas to end this plight.
The first foreign leader to react to the meeting has been the Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. He expressed caution as the two Korean heads of state met.
We welcome, but with caution, these meetings and the remarks that have been made by Kim Jong-un. But we have seen this before. We have had false dawns before on the Korean peninsula. So that's why it's really important to maintain the pressure of the sanctions. It's the economic sanctions that have brought this apparent change in attitude, and that pressure has to be maintained. But the goal is denuclearization of the Korean peninsula.
Turnbull only expressed what other world leaders, such as US President Donald Trump, have been saying in the weeks ahead of the historic talks. The world is willing to be cautious on this meeting of the two Koreas, but it's also more than willing to have a little, if not a lot, of hope that peace can be achieved in the two nations that have been technically at war for 60 years. Arabella Sibalak, WION.
Kim Jong-un's handshake with Moon Jae-in is the stuff of history, regardless of the outcome. Here's a look at some other handshakes that went down in history as very significant ones.
On the 13th of September 1993, after months of secret negotiations in Norway, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat witnessed the signing of the Oslo Accords on the lawns of the White House. And in one of the most dramatic moments, with President Bill Clinton looking on, arms around both leaders, Arafat and Rabin shook hands, symbolizing a rare moment of hope in the bitter Arab-Israeli conflict. In June 2012, in a landmark moment in the Northern Ireland peace process, Britain's Queen Elizabeth II shook hands with Martin McGuinness, a former top commander of the Irish Republican Army, which had waged a bloody 4-decade-long struggle against British rule. In December 2013, at a memorial service in South Africa for the late Nelson Mandela, US President Barack Obama made headlines when he shook hands with Cuba's Raul Castro. This was the first such public greeting between leaders of two bitter neighbors. After decades of estrangement following a traumatic split at the end of China's civil war in 1949, the presidents of China and Taiwan met for the first time ever in Singapore in 2015. China's Xi Jinping and Taiwan's Ma Ying-jeou shook hands for more than a minute and even smiled before holding talks. The next major handshake on the global calendar is expected to feature Kim Jong-un again, but this time with US President Donald Trump. While it will certainly mark a historic moment, handshakes involving Trump sometimes make headlines for the wrong reason. The US president is well known for his awkward grapples. Most famously, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe last year appeared to roll his eyes in an apparent expression of relief after a long handshake with Trump in Washington, D.C. So how will Kim Jong-un react to Trump's iron grip-like handshake? We are waiting to see. Bureau Report, WION.